Welcome to the MindBod Adventure Pod, where every week we dive into a different practice, a different perspective on life, and you try it out with us. Join us on Substack at mindbodpod.com to watch this episode as a video podcast. And if you want to support our crazy adventures and get fun perks and exclusives along the way, join us as a paid subscriber. Now, onto this week's adventure. Hey guys, welcome back to the MindBod Adventure Pod. I'm one of your hosts, Tasha, and this is...
I'm Jeff, happy to be here with you.
And with us today, we have Ivan Bercholz, who is co-owner of Shambhala Publishing and publisher of Bala Kids, not Shambhala Kids, right? Bala Kids.
Bala Kids, yeah.
And author of this beautiful, bright book called My Friend Tara, which is illustrated by one of my favorite artists, actually, Lasha Mutual, who I've been following for years. So when I saw that she did your book, I was very, very excited. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Tasha. Thank you, Jeff, for having me on.
I'm just excited that we get to have this chat. There's so much I feel like I want to dig into here. Everything from meditations and practices for kids, stuff about Shambhala Publications itself, which has been a very influential guide on my spiritual life with the Ken Wilber and the Trugyam Trungpa and the Almas and all the books. And the other thing I was excited to talk about is just how these practices of Tara and visualization work. There's so much there, and I can even give you feedback around my son, who's 6 years old, who really enjoyed this book. We've read it a few times at bedtime, and some surprising things that kind of emerged from that. So this is going to be a fun chat.
So tell us a little bit about the how this book came together. Like, what's your inspiration for it? Because I think anyone who's done any kind of Vajrayana practice or Tibetan Buddhist practice has obviously come across Tara before. It's kind of very quintessential, compassion. And yeah, there's not that much stuff that brings it to children, although it makes perfect sense because for anyone who doesn't know, Tara practice is a very there's visualization and you're visualizing kind of this archetype of compassion. And, there's beams of love radiating from the heart and colors and all sorts of things, which a lot of adults have a hard time with. People have a hard time with visualization, but it's kind of perfect for kids because this is their whole realm, right? So, yeah, tell us a little bit about how it came together.
So, I've been the publisher of Bala Kids since it was my idea. My father and I had a conversation on our back porch of a retreat place that we have together in upstate New York, maybe 15 years ago, about, should we venture into children's books? And if so, what should it be? And he had some inspiration for things, and I had some inspiration for things. And it took maybe 6 or 7 years after that to get the right people together in our company to do it. And when we started doing it, there were a few things that I wanted to do. I really wanted to have a beautiful Life of the Buddha, which was one of our first books. I wanted to have this passion project, Life of Guru Rinpoche Padmasambhava, which I knew would lose us a ton of money, but is something I just felt like I needed to do because I loved those stories when I was young. And then I wanted a few books that introduce kids to the idea of immaterial phenomena, like how to relate to your own mind. And we have some books on that. And then this book with Tara is really our first book that introduces the idea of relating to a deity or a Buddha in an interactive way. A lot of the Buddha stories sound similar when you break them down, it often involves royalty. And I was kind of tired of the same story arc. And so I decided that with this book, we would keep the life story part a little bit shorter and then make it more about how to relate to these beings, these, personifications of wisdom. So that was really the inspiration for this. And like we said in the beginning when we were talking, I love Lasha's work. And when I was thinking about who could do a book like this, I didn't know her. I sent her a message on Instagram saying, hey, you want to write a children's book about Tara? Your art is amazing, and I think it would be fantastic. And she got back to me saying it's always been a dream of hers to do something like that, but she had no idea how to write a children's book. And would I help? And so we ended up working together. It was really a collaborative process. She wrote a first draft, and then I heavily edited it. At that point, I was not going to be a co-author. I was just the editor of the book. And it really became this back and forth process between the two of us that she felt was a co-authorship. I mean, this book is truthfully 95% hers. I mean, it's mostly about the art, and the writing is at least half hers. But we really did come to the story arc and the form of it together. And there was a lot of collaboration. I just want to give a shout out to Kempo Sonam, this Bhutanese scholar practitioner in LA, who gave us a lot of feedback about how playful we could get with some of the ideas to make it a little simpler for kids. But that's really how it happened, how the book came to be. And then, we wrote it 2 years ago, I think. And it takes a long time to make a kid's book. It's crazy. And then she worked on illustrations for a year. And we have this beautiful bundle of paper and ink now that that hopefully lights up some kids and their parents or whoever reads it to them's worlds.
Well, it's interesting, I guess it was lying around the house, and so Eden would pick it up, and he's not reading yet. He's just beginning to, but he liked the illustrations. And when I picked it up, without even realizing this is the one you sent me, I looked at it, I'm like, oh, is this going to be too religious for Eden? Meaning the same, just because like over the years, there's been, there's Christian books we'll find lying around, or my wife is Jewish and she's got some old Jewish books from when she was a kid. And there's a kind of propaganda vibe to some of those. But I mean, there's also a story vibe to it. And there's also the real legit wisdom and compassion and the transmission of what these books are trying to do. Some feels like with more of an agenda, some like this one with less. But I still was like a little bit trepidatious. Like, how should I think about this as a parent? I'm not a Buddhist. My kids, they're not anything yet. They're just kids. How do you think about that piece of it? And then I might say a little bit after about why I thought it would end up being such an interesting experience for them, because there's so much rich and beautiful and value here. But I'm just curious about that piece to kick it off.
Yeah, well, this is a niche book. It is a book about a Buddhist deity and her various manifestations and how people can relate to that. But I think one of the really special qualities of Buddhism is that, we're not seeing these beings as any different than the pure form of our own mind. It's like, we're trying to clear away the obstacles and our own confusion and our own way of seeing the world. And we have this example that we can look to that's not necessarily like a theistic idea of, this is something outside of me that I worship. It's more like this is a really amazing example of these beautiful qualities. And through looking to that example, we can awaken those qualities in ourselves. So there's a religious aspect to that, but it's really not dogmatic. It's really not preachy. It's like, in the same way that you would read a biography of Martin Luther King, and you're like, Martin Luther King is this amazing individual who I can learn so much from. Let me see this person and their qualities and see what I can manifest in myself that emulates them. It's a similar thing with something like Tara. And then, I think what makes this a little special and a little different is we're talking about things that we can't necessarily see or perceive with our own regular senses, with our own regular eyes. So we're kind of stretching the capacity of our minds outside of, just material ideas.
Well, just for the listener, so the book introduces you to Tara and basically explains how Tara has all of these different manifestations, and that are these very different colors. So the bright green Tara, the bright red Tara, the blue Tara, the white Tara, and each of these manifestations has a different set of qualities, has a different effect on the mind. And I think that for my son, it was gripping. I think because, first of all, it was naming emotions that he had, and it was introducing the idea there was something he could do about it. But the fact that it was these bright rainbow colors, and the fact that he can go inside and visualize it, which he instantly did, and he instantly had one that he liked the best. First it was the white one, then he was like, no, he liked the green Tara. And it made it fun. It was like this like rainbow candy version of internal regulation with honoring the kid's imagination. So all that together was a very potent mix.
I think what often gets lost, first of all, not a lot of Vajrayana practice has come westward in a way that mainstream people have kind of encountered. So it remains this like weird esoteric thing over on the side that feels, Jeff, like you said, like, is this religious? Like, is this dogmatic? And so much of the project, I feel like right now in these 5, 10 years since we're kind of growing beyond simple mindfulness practices and adding more compassion-based practices and stuff like that, is honing our language about how we talk about these practices and, these beings. So much of it came to English through the language of Christianity, right? Like we call it deity practice, which is really like, as you were just talking about, it's really not. It's more like we are talking about archetypes that live kind of, in the collective unconscious, or embodiments of wisdom, of compassion, personifications of them. What I love about practices like this, and why I think it's beautiful in a book form and also just really kind of salient for kids, is that, like when you envision, let's say, like red Tara or yellow Tara, those colors have psychological properties, so it's like a bundle of traits or qualities. There's red, which is kind of like fire and love and warmth, and Tara, who's this being of compassion. So you're like bundling up all these great qualities, giving it a human face, calling it a name, Tara, and then kind of saying, it feels like it's outside of me, but with this practice, I'm realizing, oh, that's me, right? So like, it's actually, to me, like these practices are really advanced psychological technology. Like it's a way of finding that in yourself.
The most simple and the most advanced. It's like funny. They seem, there's so many shapes and colors and so much imagination to it. And that's kind of the beauty of it, but it brings to life, the result of practice is pretty much the same no matter how you go about it. But there's this beauty in the Indo-Tibetan tradition of connecting to wisdom through, simple mindfulness practice, but also through these more complex practices that you dig into the qualities of things, and it's so rich for a kid. It's rich for all of us, but, especially for young people. If you just have plain sitting practice, like I've tried with kids for a really long time to do just plain mindfulness practice, and some kids can do it great, and some just can't relate to it at all. But when you can have these rich qualities and dig into your emotions and what we'd say the negative side, the afflictions of that, and then also the beautiful qualities of that. And it's like a two-sided coin, and we can choose, which we're going to focus on and which we'd like to increase. And it's a really beautiful way to dig into, the innate wisdom that's inside of us and have it be a little bit more tangential.
Yeah, and I think, one thing that Jeff and I talk about often is like different practices for different nervous systems, right? And for any neurodivergence that is like upward stimulated, like ADHD, and all of us are, even just in Western culture in general, we tend to be like a little bit more keyed up. But, Jeff and I are higher energy people. And when someone comes to me and is like, I am ADHD, I don't like sitting, it gets my nervous system on edge, I often am like, try a visualization practice or try something that is like multisensorial, right? And so a practice like this, gets you, your visual cortex is buzzing and your body is online, and, you're saying things, there's mantra or there's sound, or it's like everything comes online and everything's engaged. It's like, I feel like it just like matches a loud nervous system better.
Yeah, I agree with that in a big way. And I think there's even a ton of deeper medicine here, I think there can be a tendency in the West to want to make everything about an inner psychological process, or like, I love the view that these are archetypes that are inside of us and or they're parts of us. I think it's true. But I think there's something really, really, really valuable about letting the kids externalize this too via their imagination, to be in a world filled with mystery like that, with taras, these constellations of energy, like, it's like, come out of our own psychology. Like, let it be in the world in this broader way. And that's actually been one of the movements of more freedom for me through my practices, is being more and more oriented to that and letting myself, and how much more rich and magical life becomes. So to give kids an opportunity to play with that, it's such an interesting line, because you could easily see, oh, that's where it gets too religious, or I'm thinking the old Carl Sagan objection, the demon haunted world, where, we're all of a sudden we're running around paranoid that we're being watched by angry deities, but there's the magical side. So, how do you think of that line, if at all?
Well, I think it's one of these wonderful things where with a child we can really stick with the relative and we don't really need to get into the absolute. You know, the archetypal thing and this being a reflection of our own mind is kind of adult thinking, you know? And when we're thinking about what makes this different than theism, you know, that's a bit of the flavor of what's different of it. It's not like this completely external thing that we are worshiping that's different than us, you know, praying to it to change us. And so one of the things I worked with Kempo Sonam on with this was when we first wrote it, one of my editors thought that it sounded a little bit too theistic. Like, you know, we imagine Tara and we're receiving these things back. And I asked him about that. And he said, no, Tibetans really think like that. He said that the main purpose of praying to Tara is to work with the different kinds of fear. And there are all these 21 different kinds of fears, of subtle qualities of fears. But that doesn't make sense for kids. You know, it's like, it's a little too doom and gloom to talk about in a children's book. But, you know, he said that in Tibetan and Bhutanese culture, they really do. They pray to Tara for all these different things. And, you know, the more scholar practitioners know the reasoning for that. But it doesn't matter whether you know the reasoning or not. You know, the fact that if you're bringing goodness into your mind, you know, and you see this as a complete manifestation of goodness, then that will shine forth. You know, and the more vivid that it can be and the more real that it is to you, the more powerful that it is. You know, and in that way, in the most simple way, it doesn't matter whether what we're talking about is Tara or something else, you know, on a really basic level. You know, on a deeper level, you know, if you are a Buddhist practitioner, there's a little bit of a deeper meaning. But on a most base level, by imagining a complete personification of purity, of goodness, of, you know, awakenedness, and occupying your mind with that instead of something negative, you know, you're bringing those positive qualities into your mind. And then you also have, like you said, like there's the beauty of the magic of it. And, you know, that's one of the funny things we did with this too. We thought that it was a little too serious in the first version of it. And so one of the things that I did was I wrote the character of the dragon narrator because I just wanted that sense of mysticism, of like just complete magic nature. And it's a funny thing for people who know a little bit of Tibetan. We called the dragon Druk the dragon, and Druk means dragon in Tibetan. So Dragon the dragon is our narrator character. But yeah, I love that there's that sense of magic, that there's that sense of beauty, that you're not so fixated on just what you can see, feel, and touch with your ordinary senses.
It just kind of brings the field alive a little bit. And I actually love that the dragon is so perfect also because my teacher, my closest teacher anyway, Lama Lina, you know, she spent a lot of time in India with Tibetans, but she's a Western woman, well, like lived there for 50 years. And she always talks about how Tibetans see dragons. Like they're like, you look up in the clouds on like a, you know, thunderstormy day and they will see dragons, you know? And when she's telling these stories, somebody will invariably ask, like, why can't Westerners see dragons? And her answer is always just like, it's not in our system of understanding. You don't see what you don't believe is possible. If you believe something is possible, it becomes part of your reality, right? It's just kind of like the way that you are processing, the way you're parsing up information. So she's like, Tibetans see dragons, Westerners do not see dragons. It's just, she's like, it's that simple. So there's this like lovely deeper meaning in having the book be narrated by this like magical character that is really an invitation to see the world differently.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
really quite cool.
I love that you picked that up. Great.
Do you think, Ivan, that you might be able to walk us through the Taras, the color and the qualities? And I'll just say when Eden, starting with the white Tara, I'd ask him to visualize it, his whole body language would get very settled and calm. So it really works. So for those who aren't familiar, maybe just who these Tara, what the qualities of these different Taras are, and then maybe even a practice that you could guide us in.
Yeah. One thing that we very intentionally put as our author note at the beginning was the 4 immeasurables, which basically sets the intention. The idea in any practice from the later turnings of the wheel from the Mahayana and Vajrayana tradition is that we don't just do that practice for ourselves. The primary purpose for us doing the practice is to benefit others. So we start with that intention. And so we put those lines on the title page, and I'll read those first to just set our intention. May all beings enjoy happiness and the root of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the root of suffering. May they never be separated from the great joy devoid of suffering. May they dwell in equanimity, free from passion, aggression, and prejudice. So we start with white taras, which bring a sense of calm and peacefulness. Friends, family, neighbors, babies, animals, and all those that need her care most can feel protected and at ease when thinking of her. White taras can help dissolve aggression, lighten sadness, increase clear thinking, and bring sweet, dream-filled sleep. Next, glowing yellow taras provide richness. Thinking of them can increase positive qualities like patience, confidence, understanding, and love. And then in each of these spreads, we have the tara itself, and then the tara in the heart of a child. So the idea here is that in each kid, that quality of tara can be in their own heart, that it's not separate from them, that they just need to recognize that nature in themselves. Yellow taras can ease anxiety and stress and reduce vanity. They also offer nourishment, like food growing in farmers' fields, a warm home, clothing that keeps us comfortable, and communities where we feel safe and valued. Radiant red taras reduce desire to always have more and more and more. They invite in all the things that make us content, happy, and healthy. Red taras can appear as laughter and joy, safe places to learn from wise teachers, medicine and doctors, growth and new friends. Vibrant blue taras help clear challenging emotions like confusion and hatred, sometimes even before they appear to create suffering. Blue taras might look stern, but their eyes radiate great kindness and empathy. They can help prevent accidents, natural disasters, and fighting. Brilliant green taras provide protection and compassionate action that help us awaken from confusion and pacify jealousy. Green taras are the fastest acting of all, flowing through the universe and benefiting all that they encounter, particularly melting jealousy from our minds. They can appear in many ways, such as kind words, a smile, or anything else that eases suffering. And so with that in mind, we'll do a little guided tara practice. And the idea here, as we explain in the author's note, that we can all be like Tara. And even if we can't do everything that she does in the very beginning, we can emulate her qualities by seeing them, bringing them into ourselves, and then having the intention to benefit like she does. So I like to do when I work with kids in meditation, I like to do a bit of a somatic breathing practice first, and I like to do this as an adult as well. So really with no visualization, we'll just take a deep breath through our nostrils and hold it, and then exhale through our mouth. So breathe in, and hold that, and then breathe out vigorously. Breathe in. In. Out. In. Out. One more time. In. Out. And then just feel the relaxation in your body and mind from the deep breathing. And if you can, let your thoughts settle a bit. And then bring into your mind the image of green Tara and some of her qualities, the qualities of wisdom, compassion. And then imagine her smile that she's smiling with affection in her eyes, and that it feels like rays of sunshine are warming you. And that that's coming to us through beams of light, immaterial light, from Tara to us, and we feel the warmth of her compassion. And then we'll start repeating her mantra, which is Om Tare Tutare Ture Soha. 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 And as you say this, imagine that Tara's love and protection wraps you in a sense of calmness. And as you're saying it, think that Tara's qualities dissolve into you. And we'll start with that, just us feeling that wisdom, that compassion, that sense of calm, taking that into ourselves. Om Dare Dudare Dure Soha. Om Dare Dudare Dure Soha. Om Dare Dudare Dure Soha. And then thinking that those qualities dissolve into you, now it's your turn to share Tara's gifts by sending out loving feelings to others with the wish that they will feel joyful and at ease as well. So you take in those warming rays of light and you let them shine through you and spread out to all beings who are suffering from any kind of physical afflictions, mental afflictions, suffering from hunger, from any kind of pain, the pain of not having, the pain of heartache, any kind of suffering. We're sending them the loving qualities of Tara that we're receiving in ourselves and letting it shine out to them. Om Dare Dudare Dure Soha. Om Dare Dudare Dure Soha. And it can be a little difficult to imagine infinite beings from the beginning, so we can start with those that we know, our pets, our friends, those around us who we appreciate. We'll start with them, sending them loving kindness, Tara's blessing. Om Dare Dudare Dure Soha. Om Dare Dudare Dure Soha. Om Dare Dudare Soha. And then we'll expand out a bit, sending that love and compassion to the people we know, the beings we know who are a little difficult for us. Maybe our neighbor who is grumpy about the way we put out our trash, or the person in the grocery store who is rude to us at checkout, the friend of a friend who we never want to come over for dinner. Whatever it is, the people we have a little bit of difficulty with, we'll start sending them love and compassion. Om Dare Dudare Dure Soha. Om Dare Dudare Dure Soha. Om Dare Dudare Dure Soha. Then we'll expand out from there to those people in our local vicinity, the people in our town who we might see but not know, the various birds, bugs, the beings we see and don't see that are closer to us, that we've experienced. Om Dare Dudare Dure Soha. Om Dare Dudare Dure Soha. Om Dare Dudare Dure Soha. And then we'll expand out to a sense of infinite beings, that there are as many beings, more beings than we could possibly imagine. Both those who we can see and who we can't see. In Buddhism we call it the 6 realms of existence. There's endless beings and endless suffering. And just imagining that sense of endless suffering, endless beings, we take in that warmth and wisdom and we send it to all of them, impartially. Om Dare Dudare Dure Soha. Om Dare Dudare Dure Soha. Om Dare Dudare Dure Soha. Om Dare Du Dare Dure So. Om Dare Du Dare Dure So. Om Dare Du Dare Dure So. Then when we're finished reciting, we think that Tara slowly fades into your heart like a rainbow vanishing into the sky and becomes one with you. And then just rest silently for a moment, feeling that sense of inseparability between you and Tara. That you are not different from Tara and Tara is not different than you. That she abides in your heart. And then this isn't in the book, but we'll do a quick dedication of merit. We'll take this feeling that we're feeling right now, and we'll wish that any benefit that we've created in doing this practice, any peace in our own mind or benefit for others, that generates a sense of goodness, and that we're not keeping that sense of goodness for ourselves, but again sending that out infinitely to other beings, that they may feel this sense of calm, peace, and awakenment. So just take a moment to have that feeling of not keeping the positivity for ourselves, but sending it, sharing it with all beings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah, thanks, so.
oh my God.
I
Hold on a second. Sorry. Don't say anything quite yet. Can you guys wait 2 minutes? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Sure.
just gonna run and go pee or something. Yeah. Jeff, you're back.
Welcome back.
I'm back.
Jeff.
Sorry, friends. That was unexpected. Should we pretend we just came out of that meditation?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I have to pretend. It's still very much lingering. So
Yeah, Jeff, you should go first because I mean, this is like my, Vajrayana is a core practice for me. I'm always really interested to see how it lands, especially like the full practice with visualization and with sound, with mantra for people who are like newer to the practice or
well, I mean, the first thing is just purely functionally, when you have more things to do, when you're visualizing, you're creating an intention to connect to those qualities, and you're repeating a phrase, any bandwidth for thinking, it's taken up, It's a very sophisticated absorption practice because it operates on all those sensorial levels. So that's the first thing I notice is how, I mean, once I get into it, first there's a little bit of like, okay, what's this? I'm not familiar with this particular mantra. I have to learn it. And in fact, I remember reading about passage meditation, this particular style of meditation where it's about deliberately learning a longer phrase and memorizing it. And that's part of the concentration that develops. So there was a bit of a figuring that out at the beginning, but then once I kind of got into it, it was filling up all parts of it. And then on top of it, I can really see how practice like this could benefit people like who may have a little bit of hypervigilance or who we often tell people to meditate in this open awareness way or with sound, but it's very internal doing this. And it feels very safe. And it feels very like you're kind of focusing inward with the inner sound. I mean, in my case, was just repeating it in my head. And I was going to ask about the in head, but out loud. But the effect of repeating it in my head is there's this safe, incubated feeling. And then it goes really well with as I'm visualizing the green Tara in this case, like myself as that, the qualities coming out. But there's a kind of composing and settling from that inward focus to all of that. And then just the green Tara, there is just, as soon as you're visualizing the smile, first of all, the smile itself is radiant. The green itself is so generative. It's so generous. And there's that vibratory feeling yeah, I loved it. Yeah. So I'd be curious what your thoughts on any part of that.
Yeah, I think it's one thing that's really important to say in Tibetan Buddhist practice and Vajrayana practice in general is that you always have two sides to the practice. A lot of people just see the various forms and think that it's kind of a perversion of Buddhism because it doesn't have the kind of open awareness, but it does. Actually, all Vajrayana practice has form practice and emptiness practice. There's always a creation and a dissolving. And it's said that those two aspects work with the extremes in our mind of eternalism and nihilism. So we're working with, our sense of nihilism by countering that with form. We're countering the habit of nihilism by creating a form. but then we don't stay attached to that form. There's always a dissolving of that. Every practice you do, there's a dissolving of that. And that works with our habit of eternalism, that we then are not attached to the outside form, that it always dissolves. And so, it's said in all of the Tibetan Buddhist practices that it's important to have those two aspects, that there's the creation and the dissolving of it. Because, in any form of Buddhism, we're working with the extremes of eternalism and nihilism, not being stuck in either extreme, that both are seen as extremes. But my teacher, Tinlin Rinpoche, always said, if you're going to be stuck in one extreme, choose eternalism, because it's more positive.
It's true.
And that's a real thing. Until we attain enlightenment, we have habits. And if you're going to choose a habit, that you lean into until you dissolve all habits, lean more into that habit, because from that, positive qualities happen. Positive qualities manifest.
It's much more alive than nihilism.
Yeah, it's much more alive. But ultimately, we have to let go of everything.
And in a very practical sense, it can be hard, unless you're very practiced, to just jump into some kind of open awareness or trekche, dzogchen kind of cutting through. So what this does, it's like the workout before the shavasana, right? It's like all these lights moving and there's colors moving, there's words coming out of my mouth and there's me and there's all the beings. And then all of a sudden, and then you can kind of just release in a way that you couldn't if you just sat down on the cushion and said, okay, open awareness,
That's a great metaphor. I haven't heard that before, but that's, thinking of it as part of the workout that makes the entire thing feel really complete. And then, Jeff, you mentioned the actual hearing part of it. And so often when you do longer recitation, I didn't sing because you don't want to hear my singing voice, but it's beautiful to hear the singing of the mantra or just the recitation and the vibration of it in your voice. And then always you work to the point where it's just in your head. Usually.
So it starts on the outside and goes in.
Yeah. And then it turns. So usually when you're doing, if you have a mala and you're counting, you'll do a certain amount out loud, and then you'll kind of get quiet and it'll be more internal.
Why is that? Because it's like there wants to be a sort of withdrawal from the senses, a kind of internal composure. Is that deliberate?
That's my assumption. I've never heard a specific teaching. I've just been a part of a lot of rituals, and that is almost always the case. So that's been my thought process.
There is also, like, if practice like this becomes your core practice, usually in this tradition, everyone has like their yidam. Like, so there's a zillion different kind of practices like this. For example, mine is one of the red taras. That's kurakule right there. And so then if you're taking this practice and making it like a gonzo, like I'm doing this all day long, the mantra becomes this like unbroken thing that's going on underneath everything, right? So you're going shopping, you're talking to people, you're writing your emails, and it's just like, it's like just kind of like the background hum, that it's just pervades everything. So, in practice, if it's out loud and then it just kind of recedes, you're practicing that just continuation,
It's funny. I was listening to another interesting podcast recently, and they were talking about mantra. And one of the things this guest was saying is how mantra really is one of the most ancient human practices across cultures. And he likened it to like human bird song. Like it's almost pre-language. Before we organized ourselves into coherent, pardon me, phrases with meaning and vocabulary, there was a kind of sounding that we would make in our environments and to each other. And no doubt that would have had a repetitive quality and a rhythmic quality and these refrains. It was like that was our first practice. I just love that image.
It's something that we're so cut off from in the West. I don't know why. We're like we've just beat all of the magic and play and spontaneity of sound and everything out of us. It's like if I open my mouth to say something, it better make sense. It better be for a reason. Like, don't just say syllables. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, in that spirit, I have this practice that sort of spontaneously emerged with my 6-year-old and I, where we'll be drawing together and then we'll just start. He's often repeating times tables and 10 to the 1 and 1 to the 10. And I'll be like 1 to the 10 and 10 to the 1, 1, 10, 1, 2 and 10, 1, 2. And he'll go 10, 1, 2. And we'll just start creating these weird songs that'll just build on each other and there'll be like a mantra quality, but then it'll change to something else and put in weird rhymes. And it is so, it is like the favorite thing in the world that you get so settled, so absorbed. It's so open to this channel opens of pure creativity. There's this pure connection. He gets this electric look in his eye, and we start, and it does really feel like there's some primordial thing that's being tapped into there.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, and I think that's one of my big laments with Buddhism in the English language is it's lost some of its musicality, like the Indian traditions, the Hindu traditions and Buddhist traditions and the Tibetan traditions are so alive with the musicality of the tradition. And that brings, at the level we need the feeling, it evokes feeling. And until we're beyond feeling, we need that sense of feeling. And we haven't quite hit it in English yet. And so, like a lot of my community does its practice in Tibetan often. But then if I'm in retreat, I'll kind of go back and forth between the feeling of the musicality of the Tibetan and then the understanding in the English, because both are important. And unfortunately, even though I should be a polyglot at this point, I'm woefully inefficient or incapable in most other languages.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is why music is so important. And I'm really blessed in that so many of the Sangha that has kind of coalesced around me and around my different teachers in the last couple of years has been really younger and vibrant. And, on our tsok, which is the party that you do at the end of a retreat, I will DJ drum and bass and we will all dance. It's I want loud, I want sine waves vibrating through my body. And there's this sense of kind of erosion of inner and outer and me over here and you over there. It's that's what mantra is doing and what chanting does. And so it's okay, if we're not at the place in Western culture where we're cool with, doing it in the traditional way, how can we tap into what we already have? Electronic music or music in general, instruments or just choirs or whatever it is that will bring that vibrational quality into practice.
Actually, when I first met my teacher, Tsinino Rinpoche, who was a very traditional teacher in some ways, he also was very innovative in other ways. And he would, after our talk, he would play music, pop music, whatever, and have people dance. But he always would say, do it with the idea that it's an offering. Whatever your dance is, make it an offering. Don't keep it as a vain expression of something. Just completely let go of your sense of self and make it an offering. And so we can bring that quality. It needs the mindset. And if we have that mindset, we can bring those wisdom qualities, even if it's not the traditional means. And I think, we'll need more and more of that.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, that's probably one of the best lessons that we can learn from children is that freeness of dance and freeness of vocalizing.
Yeah.
So it's with books like this, it's we are giving them kind of lineage language to stuff that hasn't been beaten out of them yet.
Exactly.
I think it's profound what you're saying, because I actually think, in my way of thinking about all of this, what is the nature of practice? What is it about? I don't think so much on the line of awakening, enlightenment, getting to some state. I think it's more can you get quiet so the stream of what wants to come through can come through? And children let that stream come through all the time. They let that stream come through. And what practice is going to let you trust the stream that's coming through for you, which will be different than what comes through for others, which will be something calibrated to your specific temperament and conditioning, whether the creativity, the insight, the wisdom, whatever it is, it's going to be it's math formulas for one person, and it's healing insights for somebody else, and it's psychic intuitions for somebody else, and songs, and it's can you get quiet to let that come through? And these practices seem perfectly designed for that. And Ivan, what a pleasure.
Yeah, this is fun.
Such a lovely practice. I just love that the invitation that this is a practice that is accessible for kids, accessible for people who are Buddhist, who are not Buddhist. It's just give it a shot in your nervous system.
Yeah.
So, okay, before we let you go, let us know, what's up next for Bala Kids? Do you have anything coming down the pipeline? And how can listeners and us connect with you?
Yeah, so Bala Kids, we're doing less books now than we were for a while, but we're still doing a few books a year. We have a wonderful book called Kind Carl with Sharon Salzberg and Jason Gruhl, who's a many-time repeat children's author with us. Such a sweet story about being kind to yourself and then letting that come out. in other experiences. It's a crocodile named Carl who's kind of picked on in school, and he learns to be gentle with himself and then extend that to others. And it's, kind of a very tangential version of what we're talking about in this Tara book that's a little more day-to-day relatable for kids. We have this series of wisdom stories from different traditions, one of which is out called Wisdom Stories of Tibet. And the next edition of that is Wisdom Stories of India. It's the same author and illustrator. And then we have a storyteller from each tradition contribute the stories and work with the author in those. And so we have Tibet out already, and India is coming out next year. And we signed 3 of them, and Japan is the following year. So those are like collections, I think, of 12 to 14 stories, traditional stories that either tell about an important figure in those traditions or moral stories, basically, from the wisdom traditions. So that's what I'm excited about coming out. And I just on my desk right now, I thought it was pretty cool. We have these South Asian editions of some of our books that are more like magazines, but they're printed in South Asia for the mostly Indian and Nepali and Bangladeshi community. So it's so cool to create something here that's an homage to what we've received from these cultures and then give it back. So that's making me pretty happy today. And then from Shambhala Publications and me specifically, I have a podcast coming out called This Very Moment, where I'm interviewing authors and artists about their spiritual trajectory, their childhood, and what traditions they were raised in, and whether that is a tradition that they followed or whether they turned in a different direction and followed that, kind of the story of how they came into what they are known for, and then getting a sense of who they are along that journey and some of the fun qualities and details about those people.
Awesome. Looking forward to checking that podcast out.
Yeah. And thank you so much. You two are good at this. I have to learn from you guys in what I'm doing. This felt totally effortless and fun and engaging. So thank you.
Well, thank you for what you do. And thank you for being part of Shambhala Publications. It was like an oasis for me. Long before I ever had opportunities to find teachers or anything, all I had were books, and it was mostly Shambhala Publication books. Those were my first kind of like orientations. And I think a lot of people have had that experience, and I don't know. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Ivan, good to be connected, friend.
Yeah, likewise.
Thanks for adventuring with us. Pop over to mindbodpod.com and let us know in the comments how this episode landed for you. Don't forget to subscribe for new episodes every week. And if you want to support our crazy adventures, get fun perks and exclusives along the way, join us as a paid subscriber. See you next week.